Thomas Wayne Cues.
Richard Chudy, I make cues in Pleasant Hill, California.
Chris Nitti, Orlando, Florida, Nitti Cues.
Jerry McWorter, McWorter Cues.
Bill Schick Originals.
Mike Bender, Bender Cues.
Jim Stadum, Sam Syracuse.
John Showman, Safety Harbor, Florida.
Chris Byrne Custom Cues.
Ron Haley, Haley Cues.
Eric Crisp, Sugar Tree Customs.
Andy Gilbert, Gilbert Custom Cues from Clever, Missouri.
Marcus Dienst, After Cue.
Kazunori Miki, Exceed Cues.
Bruce Kuhn, AE Cues.
Paul Drexler, PFD Studios, Marlboro, Connecticut.
So where are we going from here? Where is the industry going? Obviously, we've gone a long ways from Balabushka and everything. The quality, we can look at his cues and we say, that was really wonderful for that particular moment in time, but that was pretty shoddy work for today's moment in time. And so where are we going in the next 10, 20 years?
I'll answer that question. That was like a Charlie Rose question, kind of 4 feet long. I think where cue making is going right now, speaking in design department, is going abstract. Everything was very symmetrical, repeated around the cue, repeated mirrored in the butt. Everything was very uniform. I think it's going to go very abstract.
I agree. People's tired of looking at the same things, so it's got to venture out to a whole nother aspect.
That is certainly one faction of cue making is going to go abstract. There's still going to be other people that love traditional stuff and want to continue to do traditional stuff.
All art is derivative. All art is based on art that came before it. And anything that we do is going to be based on other cue makers or other artists or other representations of embellishment and ornamentation. That's absolutely going to happen. But what I think is the direction that it's going to go.
Before you say that, may I say one thing? Nice hat.
Thank you. I was talked into this hat by my asshole buddies, just so you know. And I paid for it.
Jerry, so it's cool.
And just to complete the trifecta here, my hat cost twice as much as either of their two hats.
Listen, I brought my hat from
Convince me
home.
it looks good. I know
As
it's
soon as
not
they
true,
see
but
it,
I'm
they
going to
need to go
continue to
out and buy a
wear
hat.
it because whoever takes the hat off first loses.
Are people really looking?
Oh, we're betting on that.
Okay,
So my answer is this, that the technology and the availability of the technology, there are techniques in cue making that have become exposed or known to other cue makers, and there's still a few secrets and there's still some cutting edge stuff and some experimentation going on, but for the most part it's not difficult for someone to learn how to do the mechanical aspects of making a cue anymore. It's just not that difficult. The answers are out there. There are websites that are devoted. Danny James, who is not here, rest in peace. Yes. He, for one of the companies that provides our cutting tools, Think and Tinker or Precise Bit is another name, another website that they have. He's written a whole dissertation on how to do tight inlays. I can only assume that someone told him all of this information. But that aside, doing the inlay work is not a mystery anymore. So it comes down to the design work, and the dividing line is between the guys who can create designs that truly are their own and the guys who imitate. Now, I'm not going to name the cue maker because I like him. We've clashed a little bit, and he's not here. But I said this of him at one of the gallery shows 10 years ago, and the people here who know what I'm talking about will remember this. I said his work is both beautiful and original. Unfortunately, the beautiful part is not original, and the original part is not beautiful. He would take other people's work and change it enough so that you couldn't really complain. You couldn't really bitch.
Come on, throw the name out there.
You know who I'm talking about. But the point is, because it was not his own and because it didn't come from inside of him, it was not art, it was imitation. And there's this big valley between art and imitation. And that will be the dividing line in the future. The guys who are truly artistic, who are truly willing to take risks and build cues that are absolute dogs and look like shit and don't sell, but you'll take that risk so that the ones that are original and are creative and do sell will build you a name and reputation. No one in the world, in my opinion, has done a better job of that than Richard Black, and he's not here. But
Richard's awesome.
Richard has taken...
He's the most prolific.
And he has taken the most risks, and he has consequently eaten the most dogs.
Richard is
And
not
I don't mean that in a personal
But
way.
he'll do, but Richard will do it, and he'll put them out there too.
Yes, he will. He's not afraid to display them because he knows that someone may fall in love with it. And that's why he's been absolutely the most prolific.
But didn't you say that all art is imitation?
All art is derivative.
Which means that...
All art is derivative, and there's a difference.
So you're all copied?
All art is based on what came
Derivative is an
before.
imitation.
And Ernie says that you all copied him 100%.
No, that's Ernie, but
Well,
no one,
we make cues, so
no one
we
here,
copy
no one
Ernie.
here would think of putting 5 points in a cue if it hadn't been done before, or 4 points, or even points. You know, if someone handed you a stick and there had been no cue makers before you and said embellish this, well, you might paint it red or something. You wouldn't really know what to do. We base all of our work on what's come before us. There's nothing.
There's definitely traditional guidelines that have been established that can't be, or have not been totally violated.
There was a cue maker that said that this isn't an art, it's a craft. And I disagree. I think that the first time they put an inlay tool into a cue and made a design, that it became art. Whether it was a diamond or a dot or whatever the hell.
The first caveman who painted his brother chasing a prehistoric bison on the side of a cave was an artist. We're all artists, and if you won't accept you're an artist, and if you're not willing to pursue that as an artist, say I'm going to, whatever demons or angels or whatever are inside of me, I'll let them out, and I'm not going to be afraid to take risks. That's how you'll break through. I believe that.
But have we gone from the really playable cues to more art, or does the artistic cue have to be very, very playable?
Absolutely.
I can
You
respond
don't
to that
have
easily.
nothing if you don't have a
You
playable
won't
cue.
play, you might as well just...
The technology, what Thomas was talking about as far as what's out there to make a cue making, the rudiments of it is not rocket science. You got a stick of wood and a screw, stick them together and go. But with today's adhesives, today's technology that the guys in the past didn't have, everybody out there makes a playable
Yeah, but
cue.
Rick, I'll disagree with you. on
No,
that.
everybody makes a
I think they all
playable
make a
cue.
playable cue, but I've seen house cues that are playable too. I mean, there's good playing cues. and
Anybody
there's
that
bad.
has
Let me go back to something that Mike said earlier in terms of the influence in this industry. And there are significant people in this industry that have tremendous impact. And I'm sitting perhaps next to the number one person, and that's Thomas Wayne.
Most people think I'm number two.
Most people refer to him as number two.
And I take exception to
That's a potty
that
joke.
because when when Thomas sort of left the cue making briefly because of his accident, perhaps I was more disappointed than anybody else because his work has driven, I think, me personally and other people more than anybody else to look at what options are out there and to look at the challenges and to rise to that expectation level.
Yeah, but you're talking about design. You're not talking about the basic core.
The core is
if you have great
if you
playing
don't make a
cues-
good playing cue, we ought to stop calling ourselves cue makers.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Okay?
That's what I'm saying.
Frankly, the
But if
playability
one
is a
has
given. It has to be a
That's
given. Well, I don't
absolutely
care
Yeah,
how.
but if one has a dot on it and one doesn't, does the dot cue play better than the other one?
And everyone here has been asked that question. Oh, that cost $5,000. Does it play that much better by someone who doesn't understand our craft? And the answer is no. It has to play good.
I know,
Cosmetic.
but here's who decides who your cues. Your customers decide how your cues play.
Money
You don't
determines what's
decide.
art.
You don't decide. You don't
Absolutely.
decide. I
And
don't
when they
decide.
ask me how do
Your
your cues play, I
customers
you know what I
decide.
tell them? I said it plays just like a cue. It
If
plays
you-
just like a
yeah,
cue.
but Paul,
it is subjective. It absolutely is
if
subjective.
your customers
Everybody's
like the
going
way
to
your
determine.
cues play,
Everybody's going to determine for themselves how that cue plays.
right. If you got a
But
customer
beyond
base that likes it.
beyond that, what we are looking at as cue makers is what is the presentation of that cue going to look like? Where is this industry going to go? Which is what Max posed.
And why are we so concerned about the presentation of it? What percentage of it is to make money?
People
And what
buy.
percentage of it is the artist's vision yearning to be free?
People buy emotionally and justify rationally. It's the emotional
I like
part
that.
it's the emotional part that design is appealing to.
You know, here's the thing.
You're not appealing to how great your cue plays because 50,000 people have one of your cues. You're appealing to a person who says, I love Jerry's designs, okay? And they accept, almost pro forma, that cue is gonna be a good playing cue.
Yeah, but you don't want him to say.
Except that,
you don't want him to say
as a player, I've played with almost every cue of all of the makers here, and very different playability. And I know it's subjective and everything else, but very different playability. Jerry's cue that I like very much, and I've been working with a lot lately, is much stiffer than the other manufacturer that I played with before. And they're very different, and so the playability, even though they may all play well, they're well in a different category.
They all play well. We got 16 cue makers here, the 16 different styles and how they play. Some make 10 cues a year or 50 cues a year. Some people make hundreds of cues a year. That's not the point. They're all good. They all work. The technologies that are available today make that happen. Now,
But are you telling me that all of your cues, no matter how much decor it might have, from your plain Jane up, that all of your cues play exactly the same?
Hold on, get to the question, because you might hit the nail on the head.
The question is, does all of your cues play exactly like, so I could pick up any Chudy cue that's ever been made in the last 5 years. And I can say they all play the same.
It's impossible because all the materials used are not the exact same material.
No two cues play identical.
No two
but
species, the same species play the same.
There's 16 different styles at this table. And it's the nature of how each one of us joins these pieces together that creates this instrument to knock balls.
But as a player, I believe that I can pick up.
The decoration doesn't have anything to do
As a
with it.
player, I believe I can pick up certain cues from certain manufacturers, change shafts, and they play very, very similar. Maybe all of yours, maybe all of Jerry's, maybe all of the Samsara, maybe all of Ernie's cues play like an Ernie cue.
But that's not the point. I think the original part of it was, or the original question was, we all make good cues. Does decoration affect playability?
Change that.
No.
You know, the truth of the matter is, and there are people at this table who will deny this, don't know it, or don't want to admit it, but the truth is, the vast majority of the playability of cue is in the last 6 to 8 inches of the cue at the business end. Okay, that's very, very important. Very important. Now, the rest of the cue, if you adhere to accepted practices of assembly and construction, and if you don't, I honestly believe it almost comes down to, if you do the basic right things, it will be a playable cue, and the only way to make it less playable is if you screw up, if you do something wrong. It's almost hard if you understand building a solid cue, your cue will appeal to a section of the market.
Certain style, yeah.
And I've said for years, if you put 10 good players in a room and 10 cue makers' cues with them, you'll get at least 8, swear to God, opinions.
Okay, let me interject.
I gotta disagree.
Hold on.
Listen, the first part of the cue's playability is the first 29 inches.
That's what he was saying. You can screw the shaft with different things. Hold on. Let me say something.
Weight, it's balance, it's feel. It isn't just the tip and the barrel.
Let me say something.
Of the shaft or the butt?
Of the shaft.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get.
Inches of the shaft.
The shaft is the most important part of the cue.
Yeah, but
Are you guys gonna make me take my hat off?
The weight and the balance.
Don't you take it off.
All right, listen, Jimmy, tell me if you agree with this.
Weight and balance, doesn't that matter?
You have to hear what I say before you can respond.
I'm arguing with him right now.
Jimmy, listen. I think we're talking, we've just spent 15 minutes here talking about playability of a cue, and I think that's a complete waste of time. That is about interesting to maybe 15% interesting.
Before you can argue the point.
That's maybe 15% interesting.
It's Max's
I think the
fault.
other part of it is design, and where is cue making going? Everybody that's here is at a collector's show because they're building high-end cues and because they're interested in artistic things. This is not a draw your ball contest.
Yeah, but
this is an artistic
I thought
endeavor.
we might be on the internet where there might be people that play pool.
But let me tell you something. That ain't my reputation as a good playing cue is extremely strong.
So
that ain't what I'm
I don't
selling.
care.
That's not why I'm asking somebody to give me $5,000,
I do think
2 months' salary to buy my cue.
I do think you can.
It's artistic.
You can compare it a little bit to a sports car, though. You know, you go out and buy a Ferrari or Lamborghini or Porsche, it's gotta run. I mean, if somebody comes out with a,
The real bottom line is.
That's a given, that's a given, so why are we talking
But
about
if
it
somebody
any
comes
further?
out with a
The
brand new
minimum
car
standard is it
that's in the
has to be
same
playable.
league as a
It has to
Ferrari or
be playable.
Lamborghini and it doesn't run,
That's the minimum
they
standard.
won't buy it.
That's a
I'll
given,
agree
we
with
already
that.
understand that.
How many
Everybody-
times though have you been criticized because how can a cue that possibly looks that good and that fancy and that artistic, how can that possibly play well? And people are routinely surprised when they pick that cue up and all of a sudden, wow, it really plays well.
I'm totally interested in the play conversation.
I get that constantly.
It's not-
But
But our
the answer
market
is,
isn't.
that's not
That's
what
the
they're
bottom
buying.
line.
That's not true.
That's
No,
not what
that's
they're
not true.
buying.
That's not what
They're
they're true.
buying
When it
where this cue separates itself from an artistic and a design standpoint from
Right.
everything else out there.
That's right.
And that's where this market is going.
That's right.
Yes.
Talking about the playability characteristics, we might as well be talking about Volkswagens. That's not what we're building.
That's right.
Something that I just noticed, actually I've been thinking about it for the last 5 minutes or so, is that the oldest and most experienced, most venerated cue maker at the table right now is Bill Schick, who hasn't said anything. And I'd like to hear from Bill, your opinion on playability versus, it's my belief, I'll say this first, other people can object, but I believe that there is a minimum base or a frame for a cue that must be playable. That's like the minimum you have to achieve that. The art is beyond that, is above that, but if you make a very pretty cue that plays like shit, a great example, the most example I can think of is the McDermott Eliminator or Exterminator or whatever they called that thing that weighed 25 pounds and had all the knife blades hanging off of it. It was pure art and completely unplayable. You couldn't even hardly lift the thing.
Picturesque, you play with it, right?
Forget hitting a ball with it. I mean, technically you probably could, but that was unplayable. Okay, so that falls outside of the realm of what we're talking. What we're talking about is you have to be able to play with the cue. I consider that the minimum. It has to be playable. Can't rattle like a freight train, can't wobble, can't break in half when you hit a ball.
Let me submit this before I get Bill's response, which I also am very interested in. If somebody does really tight, good, clean inlay work, if their shapes are really good, if their finish work is good, if their wraps are good, if they're doing all these fundamental things that you can look at that is well executed, the cue plays good. They're not going to put rubber bands under the wrap. They're not going to they're not going to have techniques that are far, far below the stuff that they're obviously doing.
But what about the cues that play great? Why do they play great?
Well, because
And not just good.
that's somewhat subjective.
A broomstick is a solid piece of wood, but you don't get any feel out of that. It's the way you join the front to the handle,
Sure.
put a little torque under it, and then that cue resonates.
But
you could feel it.
Sure, but what I'm saying is anybody that can execute all the rest of this stuff, they know those things. They're not there. That's
That's
not the audience,
101.
not
You
what we're
can't get to the master
Let's
class
listen to Bill.
without passing 101.
Bill, what's your opinion?
Man, I'm enjoying listening to y'all.
Well, one of the things that I think we need to say, and Bill's probably a great example, Bill has some of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful, cues in the world, and they're very, very pricey. So his cue at $25,000 is probably not played very often. So is playability really important at the $25,000 level?
Yes.
It was at one point and it still is, absolutely.
The biggest key becomes to the point that the people that buy the beauty, they bought those beauties because the beauties for them played real well.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people building beautiful cues, but the cues didn't play good, so the collectors aren't buying them. But when you go to that 8 inches you're talking about, you're really wrong. I don't care about that first 8 inches. If it's the greatest 8 inches in the world, if that back 12 inches has got a rattle in it, when you hit a ball, that player's gonna lay it down.
I agree with that. But if the first 8 inches is the most important,
Well, you can't
we should
say
all
that.
put a predator on the end of his
You
cue.
cannot go there about that first 8 inches. If
I
the
didn't,
rest-
it was Thomas.
Well, whoever said it, they're wrong. If the rest of it isn't any good, the 8 inches don't matter.
But if you take your cue,
It's 29 inches.
Thank you.
that you have a great butt on your cue, and he believes that the first 8 is important, then the OB and the predator and everything else is what you should put on the front end. I personally don't believe that.
No, you're back to what I was saying.
No, that's not
The
true.
back end has to be good for the front end to work.
But
The front end is the greatest piece of front end in the world, but the back end makes all the noise like a can full of rocks.
I agree with you.
You're gonna lay it down.
So let's say you have a perfect back end.
Then you gotta have a perfect front end.
Now tell me about the front
Kind of
end.
like a woman.
That's what I'm saying.
Tell me about the front end.
It's
In
all that you gotta have.
because
Exactly like a woman.
I know you were on the road. You did a bunch of things with Buddy in your youth and all that stuff. Is the low deflection shaft
Oh,
for the champion players?
just quit it, quit
They
it.
tell me that they cannot make the best shots.
Troublemaker,
Just
you.
quit it. Just quit.
They don't, that's a can of worms they don't want to.
That's
Now, let's open that can of worms.
Okay,
Let's
fine, I'll
quit.
talk about that can of worms. Here's what I'll say about it. is-
Yeah, that deflection
This-
stuff.
This
didn't come
deflection
in
is
till-
all up here, and I think that the
Just
thing
somebody
is,
on a computer,
the
Will.
pool player's brain can compensate whatever deflection. If Bill's cue has a little deflection and my cue has some deflection, and that's why a player takes X amount of time to get used to a cue. His brain is getting used to the difference in deflection. Everybody's cue is gonna be different, and when they sell all this low deflection, they're actually taking away from the intelligence of the pool player.
I've been asked
The pool player will compensate for the deflection of whatever cue he's playing with. His brain will do it. Every one of us do it when we play pool, and the rest of it's all bought and sold.
I happen to agree with you.
Out in the sports world, you can take 3 different sports. You can take shooting, billiards, and golf. And in shotgun shooting, they all think that the problem is with their gun. In the pool world, that they all think that that next cue is going to be the answer to their dreams. And in golf, they think, well, if they get another set of clubs, their game is going to improve.
5 yards.
They're always looking to throw money at their problem instead of practice.
But
And the majority
all
of the
sports
people
are
that go
that
out and buy those
Spend money to make
quote-unquote
themselves
low
better
deflection
As
shafts.
opposed to practice like they're supposed
That's
to.
right.
do.
That's right. Those people that are buying low
Won't
deflection
mean
shafts are looking for a
another
quick
10
fix
years.
for their problem
all
instead of going out and learning
all
what their
sports
cue
are that
does.
way. Every
The
skier
brain will allow
is trying to
them
buy a
to
better
compensate.
turn. Every tennis player is trying to buy a better serve. I mean, that's common.
All right, so let's stop talking about it. Let's talk about design and what we do.
I just want to say one thing to what Jim said, real quick. I've been asked 100 times, if not more, once people find out, these are not outside of the realm of our industry, people find out that I build custom pool cues, and they'll ask, hey, what's the best pool cue in the world? And my answer is, and it's always been,
Mine.
the best pool cue, yes, absolutely. It's
Sam
mine.
Sarah, it's a Sam Sarah for sure.
And if I were to rank them, you'd put Sam Sarah, well, we're just, never mind. But, no, what I tell them is this. I say the best cue in the world is the pool cue that you've been playing pool with for 15 years, because that's the one you know, that's the one you've learned.
Exactly.
That's the cue you know. And you want, and the proof of that, if you only have to look any deeper than Efren Reyes. If you ever handled and saw his cue that he won countless and countless championships and money with, and this piece of shit Philippine, unbelievable, a broomstick would seemingly be a better cue, and the man could beat anybody in the world. And the bottom line is, that's the cue that he knew.
Thomas, now that you've completely destroyed our whole industry.
Philippine market, of course, you know.
Thomas, take a break.
But Thomas, if you look at the golf industry, people spend a fortune to become a better golfer. And if you as cue makers, if you cannot convince the public that happen to be listening to this, that you step up a little bit by spending at minimum $1,000 or $2 for a cue from one of this group here.
Look, you cannot buy a cue at
cannot-
Walmart that will play. That's a given. You can't, Walmart, there's no cue in Walmart that will play. Even if Efren Reyes, whoever made
No, but
his
Efren
cue.
Reyes could play with a cue. for
Possible, if he played with it
He
for
can
15
beat you
years.
with a cue
If
from
he played with it for 15
Walmart.
years. So the bottom,
15
to
minutes
answer your
is probably
objections,
enough for Efren.
to answer your objections, if you're gonna play with a cue for 15 years or 5 years or 5 months or 2 weeks, and the truth of the matter is, learning that cue will improve your game and make your game better and bring your game up.
That's my point
Then
about
why
the
not
deflection.
make it an attractive, desirable cue that you like?
Exactly.
The cue maker who made that cue, who has made a living, I personally have made my living, my exclusive income, I've done some consulting lately in the last couple of years, but for the most part, my exclusive income for over 2 decades has been building pool cues. If I've done that means successfully, that means I'm building a cue that some segment of the pool playing population can play with and like it and consider playable. So the truth, and with your cues and with your cues and with everybody's cues here, the simple answer is buy the cue that you love from a reputable cue maker and then play the shit out of that cue and you will be a better pool player.
And one thing that also happens when you do that, when somebody steps up and makes the decision to buy a cue based on whatever reason, and they spend a certain amount of money investing in themselves and their game will improve because they're, number one, believing in themselves, investing in themselves, they're committing, they're making a commitment, and the question ultimately becomes, like it is in everything else across the world, why Volkswagens and Cadillacs exist, what's your price point? And who's the cue maker in this room at this table? We've got 16 styles, 16 this and 16 that. No,
it's
but
about
as soon as
customer
someone
service.
steps up,
No, it's about customer service.
well, that's not customer service. As soon as someone steps up and buys something that they believe in, their game is going to get better.
It is, but we're all making great cues.
But
yeah, I mean, you can put all the advertising and hype and spin and all this shit.
Well,
what really matters,
no deflection.
Whatever's in your marketing.
Don't deflect.
But what really matters and why the customers come back to you is because you take care of your customers. It's customer satisfaction. If there is a problem, and if you're a cue maker that's never had a problem, you're a
Oh, that's built in.
That's
built in, and I know.
But I mean, that's what determines if you're gonna be in business and stay in business.
And I agree with you.
Well,
you're
building your relationships.
You're half right, and that half is 100% right. But let me say a couple other things. Design and desirability of the product is obviously incredibly important. There's nothing worse that can happen for a cue maker than to find a customer that spends $5,000 on that cue, and then a year later the customer decides he wants to sell the cue and he can't get $2,500.
Oh, that's a different issue.
That's the worst. That's the death nail.
That's
because
a big issue.
yeah, well, the point is it's confident. The customers need to have confidence in a product, whether it's play good, that it's going to last forever, it's not going to fall apart, it's going to get good service, and that it has an intrinsic value. They have to have confidence.
The best way you can do that is be a cue maker that makes 10 cues a year, and it'll always have that value.
No, that's not true.
No, that's
because
not
they
true.
won't. No, that's not
cue,
true. No, that's not. Jim, I'm going to tell you why that's not true.
I didn't know you ever made that move.
Because there's only going to be 9 other people that know that it's a really good cue. The reputation isn't going to be strong enough to have any kind of power. Let me add one more thing about the Japanese market, which I think is important because I think I probably know more about the Japanese market than anybody at this table except for our Japanese cue maker.
I was going to ask about that.
And one of the things that's really important about the Japanese market is obviously your reputation is super important because, which is so un-American. Those guys over there will spend $7,000–8,000 on a cue and never hit one ball with it because then it would be a used cue. So they're going to walk in, they're going to see something on the internet, and they're going to walk into a store and they're going to say, I have to have that blank cue. And they're going to shell out serious money. These are people who are taking a train to work an hour and a half to and from every day, don't own a car, that have spent serious money on a cue, and their reputation of the quality of that product has to be strong. They got to know that the customer, the cue maker's behind it. It's not going to fall apart. That it's going to play well. That their friends are going to say, "Wow, that's a great cue. I really admire your cue." They got to know that the cue has value in all of those areas, and it's different than in the American market. So the playability issue over there. Would you agree, Kas?
Yes, I agree. But in Japan, the most important thing is the playability.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm listening to your all things, but something I agree, but something not agree. Because I'm the cue maker that's producing lots of cues, and beside the Exceed and the custom cues. So I agree with you because I want to talk about more, artistic things for the custom cues.
Yeah.
Playability.
But the playability issue, the one point I'm making is the Japanese market is very different. That playability is critical because they bind that cue for thousands and never hitting a ball with it.
I think,
and that's built on a reputation.
How do they know it plays good if they're not hitting the ball with it?
Because they've heard everybody
From
that says
from
Mez
people who
cues
have balls
play
with
great.
others.
They've heard they've heard from, they've tried customers that has a mez
But
queue.
they're ultimately
They've heard
getting
for
a ball.
years, and that reputation is that gets them to spend their money.
Every medical doctor had to take the Hippocratic Oath, and the opening phrase in the Hippocratic Oath says, first of all, do no harm. Now, why I bring that up is because we want to embellish cues, make them beautiful. The more beautiful a cue we make, the more money we can get for it. So we're being paid for our art. And I've said this many times, the last 5 hours devoted to a cue pay way better than the first 5 hours. Way better. So the more elaborate and the more interesting artwork that we can do, the more money we can make. But our artwork, our embellishment, are things that make our cues beautiful, cannot do harm to the playability of the cue. If they do, if there was a cue maker that I won't mention that came up with a way of building cues, and he cut the V points in afterwards, and the cue would actually break in half. And there were dozens of cues out there when this was discovered, and he had to pull them all back and rethink his embellishment that he was adding to the cue was creating a detriment to the playability of the cue. So the point is, first of all, when we're talking about art and embellishment and inlay work, we really have to adhere to the Hippocratic Oath that says, first of all, do no harm. Your cue has to play well. The structure underneath it, the skeleton or the base or whatever you want to think of it as, the frame under the car has to perform properly. And your embellishment, you can't risk the playability of the cue just to make it pretty.
Let's
get
back to the direction that we're going, though, with the industry. And let me ask Marcus, what are the Europeans looking for?
Playability.
They don't care about how fancy the cue looks?
Sure they care. Most of them are looking at the cues, design, oh, it looks nice, I want to have that. But they don't try before they buy. So
they're going on the reputation of the cue maker first.
They know the name of Thomas, they know the name of Jerry, Bill, you, and they know, oh, it's a Bender cue, they must play well. They buy it, they can't run maybe
it's an
25 balls.
It's
they can't run 25
advance.
balls, but they are happy with their cues. So
what you're saying, though,
then they try different shafts. So then they came to a result. They say, okay, so I can't run 25 balls, so I try to figure out another cue. So that's a different thing.
I think we all appreciate it when somebody.
I think before a player should try a cue before they buy.
But don't you think reputation
a simple
is
plain cue who plays well for the customer is the best cue that they can buy.
The
next thing is how should they look for me? If I like to have points in it, so if I trust in the work that you can do or you can do, so then I can make a choice for my design that I want to have, and then I can look at my wallet what I have in. So if I have 5,000, so I say, hey Mike, can you do me a cue for 5,000? And then I know how I can play with that cue.
But
that's it. And I give a shit for what they're talking about, predator shafts and something like that.
Whatever.
I play every cue.
What's
I have to try it. I have to look at how can I shoot with that cue. And if I shoot not well with that cue, maybe I have to resell it and buy another one.
Okay, Marcus, let me ask you this. When someone knows that they can shoot with your cue, say yours for example.
Yep.
And then they decide on a design, which is going to Jerry's side, how much confidence and how much better is that customer going to feel with that design and a cue that they can shoot with?
It's his decision.
Well,
it's his. I can't feel what the.
I
can't feel.
That's exactly. That's what I'm saying.
I can't feel what the player feel. I can tell. Look, if I play a cue from Jared, I can feel the response at the handle section. I can feel the shaft. I can feel the hit.
Exactly.
Some guys are picking up what you say. If you say this cue played well, they trust in that what you say.
Well, let me ask this question. Tonight we had a vote, okay, on a group of cues that were up here, and there was a tie for the two cues that the People's Choice Award was, okay. Everybody in the whole that came in here, both of those cues, both Paul's and Bill's, were scrimshaw. Now, let me ask this: every one of you guys here, does that make make you decide to maybe think more about scrimshaw because those cues won that award, or are you going to go in a different direction?
How about those cues won and nobody hit a ball with them?
Yeah, but the collector's choice didn't.
I'm asking about the People's Choice right now.
The People's Choice was based strictly on design, on the way
Right.
the cues.
Well, he's shifting gears.
No, I'm trying to shift the conversation. We're getting dead.
Let me interject something here.
I want to know about what you guys think about.
Let me interject
scrimshaw
something that's very
cues
similar,
working.
is in the train of thought that you're talking about. A very good friend of mine was taught at a university in California, and he taught art history.
I have a beer, Tom.
Thanks, John.
Mr. John Barton, yeah! Say hi to Jimbo!
Stir the pot.
Go ahead, Jerry.
A friend of mine was a university professor, and his field was art history. He taught art history. And an interesting conversation I had with him is he says, I teach art history and I love art history, but I don't really particularly care about art. I don't like art. I don't collect art and don't care about art, but I love art history. And his point was that the reason why famous pieces of art were created was more interesting to him than the actual art. You know, why Michelangelo is sitting on, laying on his back painting a ceiling ain't because that's what he wants to do in an afternoon. It's because he needs the bread. Because that's where that's the gig that's paying right now, and he's got debts. That's the way that art is the way art responds to commerce is always been important and is very important in our field.
So does that mean you're going to do more scrimshaw?
What you're talking about is
that's what I'm asking. That's my
question. That is what you're asking.
Well, obviously, look at the feathers.
I'd like to hear Jim's comment. I'd like you to repeat a famous comment about scrimshaw, and this relates to. It's qualified. Do you want to say it, or I'll say it for you?
Go ahead and say it for me.
Jim said this, and I'm going to qualify it first. He was talking about a cue that someone slaps some rectangles of ivory into and then sends to a scrimshander, like Sandra Brady, for example, put scrimshaw in it. And his comment, which I think is a very interesting quote, he said, that's a cue maker building a ho-hum cue and then handing it off to a real artist. I don't do scrimshaw in my cues because I don't want to have someone else put their art in my cue. So if I do and this is a personal opinion, and I'm not denigrating anyone who does have Sandra, I think she does beautiful work, or any of the other scrimshanders. But I choose, if I ever choose to do scrimshaw in my work, which actually this winter I'm going to start focusing on learning to do it, it will be my own scrimshaw work.
And I agree.
It will be the level of the quality that I can do.
I know Bill does his own.
And Bill, for example, and Mike is an interesting exception because while he does not do his own scrimshaw, his wife does.
His wife
and I happen to know his
like
wife.
Dave and I, we work
well,
together,
and she's a phenomenal artist.
But you keep
phenomenal artist.
You're right.
And they're a team together, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't mean to denigrate anyone who sends a cue out and has it scrimshaw, Jerry.
No, I'm just interested in more of you going to look in that direction.
Let me say this. Last year, I looked at a number of cues. We built the Hustler cue. The Hustler cue commemorated Paul Newman's movie, The Hustler. And that had a film strip in it, and each one of the images in that film strip was a different scene from the movie. It was designed for a specific reason. It went to charitable auction. It was signed by Paul Newman. It served a purpose, and it was a great stepping off point to show what can be done in terms of embellishing and enhancing the cue and presenting part of what we do is art. The fact that I only created the platform on which someone else was able to enhance that cue, I don't deny that one bit.
The platform,
Now,
to me, that's like the frame. It's like you.
That's correct. I made the film strip.
You're a fabulous frame maker.
Thank you.
You tack the canvas to the stretcher and hand it to someone else to paint the painting.
And the And the thought behind the Chinese dragon and the images that were created were designs that I created and sent to someone to say, your hands, okay, executing this are better than mine.
Right.
Your hands working on this are going to produce a better result than my hands are going to do.
Okay, but my question, hold on, we know what you do, okay,
And
you
then
send it
the
off.
right.
My question is, all right, Thomas just identified my question, he said, I'm gonna work on learning how to scrimshaw this year. Rick, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? I know what Marcus does, he sends it out, okay. Andy, what are you gonna do? I just wanna know what everybody here, I wanna know what everybody here thought about that vote.
But from
Do you think?
From whom come the idea?
No, I don't care who's going to do the scrimshaw work. I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about, do you guys think that adding scrimshaw to your queue is a valuable way to, number one, increase marketability, and number two, to present your work to the world?
Yeah.
Ron, what do you think?
The answer to
let Ron answer. Come on, let's not interrupt.
I like to do my own stuff, but I don't have anything against putting scrimshaw in a queue. I mean, it helps. The public likes it. Obviously, they voted for the queues that got scrimshaw in them. You know.
Bingo.
I mean, that's what they're.
Okay.
They
What do you
for.
think, Andy?
I want your opinion to this. There was a collector set up at this show this year. He commissioned me to build a queue from the beginning, a very nice queue. He had already picked out his scrimshander to do the artwork in his queue.
Totally
He
different.
wanted him to
That's
do
a
that.
custom order, that's a totally
So-
different story. He's ordering something.
No,
specific.
it absolutely is the same thing.
No,
I want to be clear about this. I
What is
don't,
your opinion? What is everybody's opinion?
don't shoot me, Jim's the asshole that said it.
I feel there's
My
nothing
question,
like.
but I wanted to answer my question. Did that vote influence the way you think about the next year's queues for this coming show? Are you going to go and do a little scrimshaw work? That's all I wanted to know. That's all I want to know.
My personal answer to that question is no, and the reason
Okay.
is not, wait, but that's not because, oh my God, I would never whore myself out with scrimshaw. The answer is because I have been thinking about scrimshaw. You met Craig, who was a world-class scrimshander.
Sure.
And a close friend of mine for 15 years. I've been thinking about scrimshaw for the better part of a decade and a half. But I've never, there's a certain amount of fear you have to overcome and a leap of faith that you have to be willing to make to say, I've always wanted to learn to play the piano, and I'm 53, but fuck it, I'm going to take lessons. It's the same way with scrimshaw.
This show, I had my first scrimshaw queue that I've done all of it myself. It wasn't a lot, but I'm proud of it. And I'm going the same way you. I want to learn how to do it.
The father of a friend of mine who was 80 years old
That's what I
was
wanted
taking
to find
classes
out.
in Japanese. This was 20 years ago, but at that time I asked him, while you're 80 and you want to learn Japanese, why would you choose to learn the Japanese language, one of the more difficult languages, at the age of 80? And he said, well, 80 is the youngest age I've got. I can't go back and learn it at the age of 20. I've got to start now at the age of 80. And that's how I feel
Here's what
about
I would say
scrimshaw.
about it is, I wouldn't go home, build a queue and send it out for scrimshaw just to get the votes. Just because that's how they're voting.
There's
You
nothing,
get the money.
there's nothing like handing somebody
Money in the
a queue
bank.
over.
I wouldn't do it for the
It costs
money.
money to hire somebody to scrimshaw.
I think
He's
that-
going to do it all himself.
I think
So-
that,
We also should remember back to what you were talking about Michelangelo. He did not paint all of the colors on the inside of his drawing.
He didn't do all of the
He did not do it.
chipping
He
away
had a lot of
on the
people helping him.
statues.
So when he was painting all those famous things, he came up with the idea, as Marcus said. He drew the outside in most of them, and he had many helpers
And how
finishing them.
different is it to say to a helper, go create my vision on that canvas? How different is that from to say to a computer, go create my inlays in this piece of wood? I don't disagree that another person can essentially be a tool in your shop. There's nothing wrong with that. We all make choices, but Frank Zappa said, and I love this quote, he said, when you make something out of nothing and sell it, that's art. And the true deciders, the true definers of what is art and what is not art are the people and their wallets. And the vote that Mike is referring to reflects a public interest in, these are people who don't know, who can't aren't on the inside and can't form the opinion, well, God, that guy just slapped some ivory in there and then handed it
But
off
see,
to a great
Wait a
artist.
minute, Jerry, you're missing an important point here.
There's a difference though.
Wait a
No,
minute.
excuse me, there's a
Hey,
difference.
I interrupted him first.
My point's more valuable.
But there's an important point here.
Jim's head's
What
better.
people might look, what the public might look at and say, oh, that's really beautiful, and vote for, is not the people that will lay their money down and buy that.
And that's
Because,
all true.
because somebody looks at, everybody looks at this and
That's
goes,
why
wow,
I
that's
asked
really
the question.
beautiful. Those are not the people that actually are in the habit of spending thousands of dollars on cues.
That's
the
why I
people
asked
that
the
spend the
question.
thousands
I
of
wanted to
dollars
know
on
if that
cues
swayed your
come
thinking.
from a very different mindset and analyzation.
So you're
of-
saying that
of
the people that spend
It
thousands of
just
dollars
dawned on
on
me,
cues
it just dawned on me
voted
what
for
Mike's
Bruce's
asking, and I
cue.
have the answer. Mike, you're asking, do I now want to do scrimshaw? Because that's where the people, the interest is going, and the answer to that is no. I just realized what you're asking, the answer is no, because the reason that I'm interested in pursuing scrimshaw is because there are side roads I want to go with art that I can't go
do it any
to
other way.
without
Right.
scrimshaw.
You know, the reason I asked the question is, Max just brought it up, is, you know, the people that voted today about, that spend money,
Collectors.
collectors, they voted for Bruce's cue.
Yes, which was
Okay.
all inlay.
Right. That's why I asked the question.
There's a
May
couple
I-
of
may
things.
I
I
wanted to
interrupt?
see how many guys in the audience here.
No, there's
you know,
a- there's a
really
May
caught
I
on.
interrupt as moderator?
Can the moderator interrupt
Because I
for a
think
moment?
we've beat on this one for, now let's go to the next jump.
Sure, let's
is-
press on.
The next question is, where do you see technology changing not only your art, but changing the cue industry in the future?
Technology is gonna let a lot of people do scrim on cues and take over that part of it. Right now, it's new. Technology will let the guy,
Well, wait a minute.
no, wait,
No,
no.
you stop right now.
Let me finish.
No, that's Bill talking.
Damn, what
Not
you're
scrim.
talking about.
That's machine engraving.
Technology's been going
Machine
along.
engraving.
Technology has been going along,
What?
and it's been allowing all of us here to make a better, more stable, better product.
Right, that's all you're-
And nobody's gonna disagree with that.
That's what technology
And
does.
the more technology goes along, and the more people get to know to use it, they're gonna be doing exactly that. They're gonna be using it, technology is just another tool in the shop. And the guy who's gonna be the most creative with that tool is the guy that's gonna succeed better than anybody else. It's a given. The guy who can handle the hammer and chisel
Well,
better.
what's the next, after we've gone to 4-axis, what's the next computer?
I'm actually
item?
hoping that robots will be making our cues.
That will step it up.
Okay, so fourth axis does this, what does that fifth and sixth one do?
It goes all around.
Relief. It allows you to do relief and.
You're gonna start doing
relief
four
machining.
things, and then working in the round, doing relief, doing other things like that. You'll be able to make parts cheaper, quicker, faster. You'll be able to do the scrim work. The
Buttons not
scrim
on
work
my
that you
board.
wanna do could be done on a machine. Bill
I think
Straub was
Bill wanted
working
to
on Bill Straub was working on a dot dimpling thing that would allow him to do photorealistic stuff. How about a laser?
But you
How
know,
about
but
laser
technology
But that-
Technology
then
is
once-
never gonna
Once you
be-
let the machine do it, it's not scrimshaw, it's now machine engraving.
Yeah, but you know what?
Well,
Technology
laser was done
is
in
never
the
going
80s.
to give
The Randy
you.
Calvert line was
Yeah,
all laser.
that doesn't matter, but this technology trickles down to the cue makers, and we always seem to be in the back seat. We were the last guys to get the pantograph, we were the last guys to get this. CNC is now affordable for all of us at the table here. Some of us at the table here.
Some exceptions.
It's okay.
And it's just gonna keep going that way, and
But Rick, what I'm trying to say is technology is never going to give talent.
no.
You're never gonna be able to buy talent with
No,
technology.
look,
No,
we-
but the
you
guy who
can't-
can
if you
use that
can't
technology
design-
the most creatively is the
It's
guy
a-
that's
it's
gonna
just another tool.
succeed.
But
Exactly.
if you can't design a hot cue with a piece of paper and a pencil,
Yep.
technology's not
Yes.
gonna give it to you.
Right.
Yeah,
And
you
that-
guys-
it-
you guys
talent
learn
is
our-
cannot
You'd
tell
learn our
it.
bar
Right.
napkins, that's all I can say. You'd
What's
learn our
that?
bar napkins.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that's what brings people to this room,
But
to
there,
this show.
but
is
there
talent.
is another niche to this market, and I will say, I just want to point that out, that some people, there are cue makers, some even at this table, who choose a very traditional look. They're not even necessarily interested in breaking into a cutting edge I don't know, I'm known for Celtic knotwork among other things. They're not interested in that. They're interested in doing the very finest work that they can do with some really traditional looks. And I was asked, he hasn't spoken here, maybe he's a little shy, a little quiet, but I'm interested in hearing from him. I was asked on an interview on one of the internet forums who I saw as who I really favored, who I liked as an up-and-coming cue maker. And my answer, I could answer that with two words. I said Kas Miki. And the reason I did is because he does some of the tightest, most refined work. He uses pantographs. Well, the point is, he's meticulous. And if you feel bound by your tools, and if you feel like, you know, if I just had CNC, if I could just get CNC, then I could move on to the next level, then you've already limited yourself. You know, with the tools that you have and the techniques that you're using, do you have them truly perfected? Do you have them down to where you cannot do it? It cannot be done any better than you do right now? I don't know if that's true of anyone. I might put Ernie on that pedestal. I don't know if I'd put anyone or that pedestal. I wouldn't put anyone else up there. That's a Joe Parker word, pedestal. But the truth is, you know, it's very easy to learn to use a tool. And let's say you're cutting in V-points. The very first V-points I cut in, I used a radial arm saw with a shaper head from Sears that would cut a 90-degree V. And I think back to that now, and I wonder why I have all my fingers. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to even be in the same city block as someone who was using that setup that I had. But that's what I did, and I didn't know any better. And I kept tweaking it and working it until I could get a true sharp point view, you know, hand sharpening. And when I realized that there's two cutters on this, and only one of them is ever going to do the actual cutting, so I could go ahead and relieve the edges of the other one so it did no cutting, and then the one that would do the cutting and make it perfect. When I realized that was like this huge leap for me, and my work became that much better. So I don't think it comes down to the tools that you're using, the scrimshaw, we talk about lasers and that sort of thing. I think it really comes down to what tools you have, how you use those tools. Sure. CNC, you can use, a Jim, for example, has found end mills down. I just talked with what's his name from Think and Tinker, Ron, and they make cutters, CNC cutters, end mills down to 1/1000th of an inch in diameter. And Jim has done some very interesting stuff with a 4/1000th diameter. So it's not, you know, you can go down to these fine tools, or you can take the cue maker not here who I won't mention approach, where the smallest cutter he's willing to use in his machine is a 16th inch diameter, because goddamn it, we got to punch those cues out. So any tool can be used in a creative and perfected way, or it can be used crudely to crank out crap. And I think that that's an important thing.
When I see a very ornate CNC inlaid cue, I admire the programming. I can't really see the craftsmanship. If a robot makes a part and makes the pocket and it's a drop-in fit, where's the craftsmanship?
The craftsmanship is in the design, which is what Jerry talked about.
So it's excellent.
No, it's not a program. It's the person sitting down, taking an idea from his brain, transmitting it to his fingers and the pencil, putting it on paper, and then saying, okay, what's the next step? What's the tool that's going to be used to execute this design and put it in this cue? It's just a tool. It's the brain and the creativity and the imagination that really is at the foundation of where this whole industry, this whole market is going. And if it's scrimshaw that you do by hand, by yourself, or if I'm not blessed because of just carpal tunnel problem, not being able to physically do it myself, and I create the idea and give it to a person to say, execute this. This is my concept. This is my idea. I need your hands to do it the same way I do a piece of CNC equipment to execute that design. It's still the design that's being purchased. Okay? It's the creativity that went into that design.
What about when somebody says, here's a cue, Sandra Brady, I'll line some feathers and lay some feathers in it. No. You have
That's a good idea.
It's a great idea. It's a pretty good idea. But yet you have absolutely no idea what her feathers are going to be.
Well, hold on.
Right? The cue comes back and they're, wow, those are awesome feathers. Where'd they come from? Well, they came out of her brain.
No, let me answer that question.
All you did is cut out the outline of the feather and then...
Jim, remember about 8 years ago when I almost had to beat you up?
I've been working out, buddy.
We could.
They couldn't find a box for Jerry to stand on.
Justin, you better be getting all this, buddy.
I'm packing weapons.
Jerry,
But that's my point, that's my point.
I think you have problems with scrimshanters, Jimmy. I think
On a deeply personal level.
there's a deeply personal thing going on.
Bill and Jim get along great.
I think that
I wouldn't let him
obviously,
get near my wife.
obviously, I think the highest.
You must have been excited waiting for that cue to come back. I wonder what it's gonna look like.
You know, when I started cue making early on, I collected brochures from existing cue makers. There weren't that many, but there was Tim Scruggs, there were the Joss West cues.
Am I done answering?
You are done.
Yeah.
And there were others, Richard Black, there was Bert Schrager.
You got a Mike Johnson one, didn't you?
I looked at Tim Scruggs' brochure, and I realized from his cues kind of spread from lower end cost up to higher end cost. And what I realized is that he had a pantograph pattern for a rectangle, and he had a pantograph pattern for an oval, and he had a pantograph pattern for a 4-pointed star with long points and short points, and there were a couple of other patterns, and that was about it. And I realized that Timmy Scruggs, whom by the way I love to death and think is a great guy.
Great guy, he is.
Great cue maker.
And builds great cues. But in those days, now we're going way back to the late 70s, I knew that he would look at his patterns hanging there on the wall and would say, you know, if I made a rectangle of this, and if I inlaid an oval of that, and then I had a star in the middle of this other material, well, that would be a pretty cue. And he was limited by his tools and didn't look beyond them. Now, that's one way to design a cue. And the other way that cues are designed, and this is the way that I design them, and I believe Jerry does, and probably most of the people at this table, the other way to design it is, this is what I would like it to look like, or this is what I would like it to feel like. This is what I want to evoke in the piece. Now, how the hell can I do that? Do I do that with CNC? Do I have someone scrimshaw it? Do I hand carve it in? Am I going to have to chisel those points to get that look? Do I recognize that if this corner is sharp, it's the look I want, but if I let it be the radius of the cutter, it isn't the look I want? What I believe the biggest secret to design is to first conceive the design, the pencil and paper.
It doesn't matter how you get there.
Exactly, the pencil and paper first.
Product, get there.
Okay, then what you're saying is that if you have a visual design, then it doesn't matter if you send it out to 16 different places and then you bring it back. You don't even have to be a cue maker. All you got to do is sit here and be an artist.
No, you got to have talent. And you can't, and talent is not going to just be getting some mailing addresses.
Well, the artist designing ties isn't making them, and he's still an artist. The artist designing buildings
Right.
is still an artist, but he doesn't build.
Right here. Andy.
And why do so many people think that the cue making is pushed by technology when all other art forms are done like they've been done for hundreds of years?
It's the finished
Casting
look.
bronze,
Your argument is that if
painting
the
with a
finished look
brush.
is marketable, then that's the art. And I don't disagree with that. I think you're exactly right.
See, I just believe that it should be kept in-house, in your house. If I got a few people here doing this and helping me and doing that, I'm over their shoulder, we're working together.
Wait a minute.
I don't like sending it out my shop.
I understand that, but I want to ask you one question.
I don't like sending it out of my shop.
Why in the world would you be buying a pen from Paul Costain? Why aren't you machining that yourself? What a whore!
You whore!
You whore!
Do you make your own bumpers? Do you make your own screws?
Well, I will say this.
Do you buy washers for rings?
Yes, as a matter of fact, you did make
We made our own bumpers out of hockey pucks for years.
Yeah, but what do you do now?
You could get 4 bumpers out of a hockey puck.
You know, you guys have
If you buy them in the summertime, they're cheap. So I don't want to go there. And we made our own pins, and we did all that shit, Jerry.
All right, you guys have stumbled upon something that I like to think about in cue making.
Busted his ass.
Yeah, that's good. You've got the collaborative effort. People have touched on, I've got the idea and I'm getting there. The question is, do you want to be able to hand make something and put it out there? Are you proud of it? Or by yourself, I'm the one guy, I did everything. Or are you going to embrace Sandra Brady this guy, that method, this jeweler, that person, and bring in a whole group that creates a piece that is so much more than what you can do by yourself.
I want all the
Can I ask you something, Richard?
Sure.
Who puts the inlay in your cube?
I put the inlay in my cube.
All right.
Who
That's
designs
a
my
handmade
cube?
work.
I design my cube.
So you can do all the inlays with
Oh, yeah, people,
different,
you're right. People don't
different-
understand CNC at all. They think it's somehow
No, you can
it's-
do it
it's
with different
handwork.
machines.
And these
You can't.
differentiations are things
Still
that we give a
have to
shit
put
about that nobody, the
inlays
blind public does
into
not,
the
by the
cube
way.
with your hand.
Still has to fit.
Yeah.
It doesn't take longer as to make it.
Now, here's another subject that I hope we get plenty of conversation on. I'm of the opinion that a cue that is clever, that is innovative, that just has some magical charm about it that just makes you want to look at it, that you just really like.
Like a McWorter?
That is valuable. That has real value. The concept and notion, the first question is, where is cue making going? It used to be, well, it has 27 inlays up here and has 47 parts there, and we'll count up the number of parts, and these cost this
The
much.
blue
and that-
book is laid out
now,
that way.
yeah, now you total up the price of the cue based on how many parts it has in hours or something like that.
That's the
Where it's going now is
Well, how do you base your price?
where it's going now is if you can create magic, if you can create something that's just got something cool going
Somebody
on,
looks at your cue and
that
says,
is
how
value.
the hell did they do that?
I don't
How
care
did
if
they do
it's-
it? They can't figure it
I
out.
don't care if they know they don't know how they do it, but if you can create something that people really love, that has value.
Okay, so-
That you look at and you say,
Cool.
who cares if it's only got 6 parts? It's got something that makes everybody stop and look.
Okay, so how do you put the price on it?
Visually, you lean them against the wall and you look at them. And that's true.
Is
You
that
can have
what
all,
you
absolutely, you can have some of the
Well,
best formulas
what do
in the
you
world,
do,
but
Jerry?
What do I do?
you lean them against the wall.
No, I don't.
He
I
has
hold
a
them
rack.
like this. You know what? I guess the value I put on the cues is the value that I think that they deserve. I guess in one respect, I think that, there's obviously, there's certain designs I do that take way more work and time in them than what the curb appeal they create. I put in 100 hours and it only creates 30% of bang and curb appeal. There's other cues I do that I put in 50 parts and it creates 100 parts of magic. I don't, when you get lucky, I guess I base them based on what I feel like
But you
they're
still
worth.
set them out there and you look at them, and the one that has the biggest bang gets the biggest price. The one that has the most work doesn't necessarily get the biggest price.
Pretty
I
much,
don't-
and
I don't do
that's probably, there's a lot of that's true.
You look at Jerry's cue that he made for the Texas collection.
Unbelievable.
It was a ebony cue with silver. That's the only thing that was in that cue, and it was a
No decals.
It was a simple road map with little identifications for location.
And when he
That
told
was
me how he did it,
that
it
was a
just-
killer design.
It's the funnest cue I've seen presented.
It was
like the
creative.
granite
It was,
collection you done
number
for
one,
Matt.
it was creative.
the
Number two, it was
difference
well
from the old-
executed. Number three, it was something that never had been seen before. That's what made that cue significant.
So you can't
That's
look
what
at how many
made it-
inlays are
made
in
it
and put a price
valuable.
on it.
That's
It's
what made
just the
people
last thing you look
look
at.
at it and say, "Wow, that's
How come the
really
rest of
really
the world
cool."
is charged
I would
by
buy
the
that
time?
cue. And it
the
is.
ivory
It's
cue
not
is
the
cheap.
uniqueness of
Only
the
because
design.
you let them charge you by the time.
I had a friend in the 80s, still a friend, but he moved out of state. Wayne Boomer is his name. And he asked and answered his own question when he said, what is a cue worth? That was his question. He said, and the answer is, a cue is worth the price you put on it if someone will pay that price.
Pay for.
And that's the, and if that sounds like whoring or if it's commercialism, the truth of the matter is art is defined by the patrons who will pay for that art. And you could go crazy building cues and not be able to sell them and hang them in your safe or on your wall or wherever you keep your cues that you're building. If you can't, if your prices are too high or if your art is not appealing, you can be like Charlie Parker, the great jazz saxophone player. Nobody got what he was trying to do till after he died. Heroin addict for 20 years. And nobody got, and now he's revered, but nobody got it at the time. Well, I don't mind the idea of my work being revered after I'm dead, but I'd like to pay my mortgage with my work being revered while I'm still alive, and I think we all care about that.
I think that's the one thing that we all really care about.
To that, the thing that I want to bring up is how much of the value of these cues is about reputation. So, and status. So if Joe Blow goes into the pool hall and he's playing with the cue and somebody says, oh, what is that? And he says it's a Thomas Wayne, or it's a Samsara, or it's a McWorter, or whatever, isn't that, how critical is that to?
Well, your question is, can Tom Cruise get more for a movie than,
Me?
yeah, than Jerry, than a lesser known actor? The answer is, of course, your reputation helps you get more money.
Yeah.
If you have a good, strong reputation, if your work is desirable and you don't put out a shitload of cues, yeah, you're gonna be able to get more per cue. But you have to pay a hell of a lot of dues. I personally have been building cues for 25 years plus, and and frankly, your experience in the industry goes a long ways toward getting more money for your work.
Bill has paid his dues more than anybody here, and that's why his work commands the price that it does. Not to mention the fact that he makes a hell of a product.
Yes.
And that's why he has the reputation. But listen, Max, your question, what people think of your cue and the reputation you have of your cue, I don't know what percentage to put it on it, but it's huge. It's huge. If a customer spends a lot of money on a cue, I'm gonna tell you the reputations that count.
The name is
everybody else on his pool team, his wife, the other guy from the other pool team, the people that come in the pool room, the people in the chat, well, not the people in chat groups, everybody else that they meet. Those people are important. This is what's important. A guy's on the phone and talks to his buddy and says, "Yeah, I bought a cue. I bought a cue today. What did you buy? I bought a Bill Schick." Really? I want to see it. I'll meet you at the pool room. And he drives him to the pool room or comes to his house because he wants to see the cue. That is incredibly important. That his friend wants to go out of his way to go see that cue because of that reputation. That's what the customer's paying his money for. He does not want to pay his money and he says, "I bought a blank," and his friend says, "Why in the hell would you buy that piece of shit?"
I agree with you 100%, but how does somebody that maybe hasn't been in the business as long, and I think Mez is a great example. He's trying to promote his Exceed line, and yet even when we had discussions all day long, the announcements were all about he's from MazQ. He's not from Exceed, which exceeds his class line. I own one of his cues. I've played with it. It plays amazing. It's a great cue. The technology and the craftsmanship in his cue is wonderful. And yet, how does he or Andy or some of the newer cue makers, without spending 100 years or something like that, do they have the chance to elevate themselves to that level? Or as Bill and Ernie and Thomas and some of the people that have been around since the 60s, are they at that level and the new guys are going to have a real tough time doing that?
There's two answers to that question. They can either earn it by putting their time in,
or buy it with advertising,
or they can buy it.
I don't think they can buy it with advertising. I'll tell you, there's a cue maker who calls himself Arnold Q. Wadsworth. I don't know if any of you know who he is, but I can't believe that's his real name. Maybe it is. But in any event, he got interested in cue making. He is 6 months into having never turned on a lathe. 6 months later, he's promoting himself as master cue maker.
That's right.
He's buying parts from Prather and slapping them together, per directions from Prather, and calling himself a master cue maker. And I don't care how hard you try, you cannot pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Because he was not really dedicated to he was dedicated to the idea, I'm going to be a master cue maker, but he was not dedicated to the idea, I am going to learn to build masterful cues. And there's a
couple other guys, Castle. There's
I don't know all of them. I don't follow it.
But
Jack Nicholson, the actor, played in a movie called A Few Good Men, and he played this colonel, this lieutenant colonel or whatever. He was on screen for a total of 7 minutes in that movie. His role totals in 2 appearances 7 or 8 minutes, and he was paid $5 million for that.
That's what time will get you.
And that can only come from all the way back when he was an easy
Reputation.
rider and committing himself.
That's what time will get
You know, the money that is commanded for his appearance in a movie is not, he's not saying, I'm a hell of an actor and I want $5 million for this. His agent got him the $5 million. His commitment was, I'm gonna understand this character that I'm playing, and I'm gonna get inside this role, and I am gonna I'm gonna do it to the best that I can, no matter what. I will commit myself to this.
But his 7 minutes may have made that movie.
Oh,
His
absolutely.
quality was unbelievable in that movie.
But that's the point.
So that's the difference of how accurate and how wonderful do you have to be. So.
But as far as
You
reputation
gotta put
goes,
your time in. When I started in this business, I was really happy to get $500 for a plain cue. Okay, that same cue today, I'm not even gonna fool with for less than $1,400.
Sure.
Okay?
Is it the same
Bill's
cue,
entry level
or is
cue,
it-
it's
No,
the
it's
exact
because
same
of your
cue,
time.
except I got a different finish. Okay?
Mike,
It's the exact same
Bill's
cue with
entry
20
level
years
cue-
behind it.
Right.
Yeah,
Bill,
it's-
right,
it's your
exactly.
time, it's your
Bill's
time.
entry level cue that he first started, what'd you sell your first cue for?
$85.
$85. Ask him how much he gets
Dr.
for an
Rob.
entry level
But
cue
fire
today.
had
If you
not
can get
been
him to
discovered.
make it, it's
Yeah.
$4,000, right, or more.
That's-
Okay?
Or so
Bill
they-
has been
Sold
building
it to a
cues
dinosaur.
for
Look,
35,
that's-
40 years.
Mike.
Okay? Time is what you gotta put in order to make the money. That's what
and
it
the more
amounts to.
time, yeah, exactly, that's
And,
exactly.
Well, that's what I'm
and
saying.
building a quality product.
But that's what I'm saying about reputation. When we go into the pool and say, I bought a bender, I'm
People
cool.
listen, people step up and listen to you.
It's okay.
When you
It's
walk into a
important.
pool room now and say, hey, I just bought a blank because they have X amount of advertising in all the magazines, not a whole lot of people are gonna pay attention to you, because they see it all the time and they listen to it. Over 20 years from now, when what Mike is talking about, and your $85 cue, well, you've got all this time invested into this career for yourself. No, of course you're not gonna make that $500 cue again, you can't afford to.
Your time's too valuable then. There's too many people who want you to build the
But advertising
you're a
doesn't
new
seem to
guy-
work
if you're a
for-
new guy-
Or Q-Tech and all the rest of the players and all that would sell for great money, and yet that's not where the industry's going as far as.
We're
custom
not that part of the
We're not
industry.
interested- we're not interested in
mass
That's what I mean, but
producers.
you said advertising might solve it, but it doesn't seem to
No,
solve
no, no, it would,
Yeah,
it
but
would.
he
If I
said
had
that, but the only thing about it is he was actually wrong.
I don't think so. If I had the
I
money.
think you're wrong on advertising.
If I had the money on the advertising and I kept yelling at people over and over and over again that X product was the best, X products was the best, there's gonna be a certain number of people that are gonna start to believe it. And they're gonna start talking to other people. But it will be time that will test the issue to see which one is gonna last. And I think that's where the most of us around here are at, when we got 20 plus years going, and you won't do it because you can't afford the time to do it. But a new guy who's coming in, the only way he can get his
He
stuff
has
out
to
there
do it.
is to put it out there cheap. But how long is it gonna take him? And is it good? Does he have the nards to stick with it? Because you're not gonna make any money doing it.
And it better be good, or because you gotta stand behind everyone. that you
Right,
build.
and then you gotta sit back and wait for those guys to tell everybody else that your stuff is good. That's when you become good. It's the secondary guy, the third
See,
guy,
like Bill, how many-
that tells somebody that your stuff is good.
Bill, how many cues do you think you've made?
I don't know, I need to sit down and figure
All
it
of
out, 'cause a lot of people ask that.
But I mean, you've made enough cues to know that if you weren't making a good cue, then, I
Well,
mean,
that goes
made-
back to something that y'all are missing, you keep referring to.
I'm not missing it, I just haven't said it.
Okay, so go ahead and say what I'm
Yeah, smart
I
ass.
want you to have some time.
Your
Your
time.
time.
Shut up, Jerry.
All
Let
right, Bill pulled the covers on Jerry.
This is
I
your
like that.
time.
Well, the one variable that's being missed in a lot of this is there's a talent level, and it don't matter whether you're talking about CNC made cues or conventional made cues or older made cues. There's a lot of guys in this business that's been doing it longer than me that are having trouble selling cues. So there becomes a talent level to whether you're doing it the old way, the new way. That's what seems to be getting left out in this conversation.
So wait a minute, you're saying that they can be doing it for 30 years, but if they
Still
actually
can't
have,
make a good cue.
if they actually have no talent, experience and machines and money ain't gonna do nothing.
Yeah,
That's
they
what
ain't gonna
I
sell
said a
it.
half hour ago.
I could name names if you
Yeah,
want, but
it's
I
the-
better not.
Go ahead,
Money-
Nitti. Come on, we're having some fun here. We're only on the internet.
No,
It's
no.
not national television.
Somebody in the world will
It's
know.
only 20 million people watching.
Listen,
20 million,
money's all
you
game,
got
Justin.
20 million a chance in here.
Yeah, but
You
here's
have 200 people this seminar.
No, exactly what he's saying.
After
is-
what I
right.
just said,
Yeah, but it'll be on
I think
YouTube
every one of
tomorrow.
these guys,
There's 89 viewing,
you
you're
know,
safe.
Listen,
they'll go to that. I think every one of these guys know what I just said. I mean, they know guys that have computers
Sure.
that can't make diddly squat.
Yeah, because they don't have talent.
Thank you.
And
That's
the
what
money
I'm
is
trying
not,
to say.
computers and money is not gonna buy you talent. Here's an interesting way to look at it that you guys all know. Ernie Gutierrez, hugely influential, arguably one of the most influential cue makers to ever make a pool cue.
Without a doubt.
In the beginning, in the very, very beginning, he was a 24-year-old kid. He had talent immediately. The work that he came out with just showed talent. And that number of years that he made cues, which was not very long, was just dripping with talent. Then he quit making cues for 13 years.
Yeah, but you're missing one point.
Hold on,
No,
let
you're
me
missing
tell
a point. You probably don't know that I'm gonna learn you something.
learn it to me as soon as I finish mine.
Okay.
He stopped making cues, didn't make cues for 13 years. But the minute he came back, the talent was there. He immediately started making cues and the talent was there.
But
It's just
time also proved the issue there too.
But you know what I'm saying, just because how many people do we know have been playing pool for 40 years, never
Still
could
can't
play, and
play.
still can't make
Still
ball?
can't.
That was my point.
Yeah,
That was my point.
it's talent. I don't care if Bob Manzino burst on the scene not very long ago.
got talent.
The guy's got talent.
Yeah.
It's just obvious. You could say, well, yeah, but he hasn't been making cues 40 years like this guy's cues. I don't care how long he's been making cues. The guy's got talent.
Manzino.
Bob Manzino.
Never heard of him.
The guy's got talent. Talent, money does not buy talent. Advertising will not buy talent.
But he has good machines too. Somebody would argue that he has good
Let me
machines.
share with you one.
Let learn us something, and I want to know. I want to be learning.
there's some learning going on.
Pardon?
You were going to learn us something. Go ahead and learn us.
Ernie found the pantograph before anybody ever knew about a pantograph.
Really?
Ernie what?
To apply to key making, you mean?
Oh, yeah, he was doing a pantograph in the 60s.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The rest of us never learned
Yes.
about pantograph.
You want to know something? Here's another interesting
machine.
people. How many know John Robinson?
Yeah.
Cue maker, lives in Arizona right now. We were talking to him about making cues and stuff. He has receipts from selling cues of billiard supplies in '59.
He's
Yeah.
older than me.
And he dyes ivory like
Yeah, he does,
nobody
yeah.
dyes ivory.
Yeah.
John Robinson.
Talented cue maker, and what's interesting though,
And he
and
puts-
this is how,
puts the pin in
and
the shaft.
anyone can learn from this that wants to be a cue maker, he hasn't died on the vine, but he continually withers on the vine because he insists that the joint
Putting
pin
his
must
pin in the
come out of the
shaft.
shaft and screw into the butt. And there are some conventions that you cannot buck.
Yeah, but you know what you're missing there, Tom?
Burton did it too, and how
No,
we.
no. Yeah, Burton did it, but you've got to take this back to the 1920s because
Sure.
Brunswick, that's
Yep.
the
That
way
was
the
standard.
standards were made.
I get all of that.
That was standard.
But there are some things you cannot buck. I mean, there are car designers, you see these concept cars that are created that will never actually drive on the road, and they're carved out of clay and they're airbrushed, and they're these incredibly beautiful, futuristic looking things. But if that car were to become a car, it's still going to have 4 tires, it's still going to have a frame and brakes and an engine driving it, because there are things there are fundamental rules to a cue that you cannot violate successfully unless you're willing to starve. And John Robinson, who I love and who is a stubborn son of a bitch, will not concede. You and I both love Burton deeply. Burton died. Prior to his death, he sold his business to Joel Hersick. And one of the first things that Joel did was he changed the way the joint was done, because he loved Burton too, but he wasn't willing to starve.
Well, that's like what you're talking about there. You know, in the era, you pick the era.
Sure.
Burton made points better than anybody in the world.
No, and taught others. Taught Gordy, taught
He taught me,
Helmstetter, he taught everybody.
He taught the rest of us.
Yeah.
But the really part that was amazing Burton made these greatest points, and then you've got Balabushka, who in the era was the greatest cue maker. But then Burton wouldn't try to change the method that everybody made it, the way everybody made a cue.
Yeah.
What would have Burton become if after George died, Burton would have went ahead and made the cue like George did?
Sure.
Because George had Burton's points.
Yep.
But it's like,
Oh, Bert and I
Like
argued.
you and I know,
We spent many nights
Yeah.
arguing over
What
this.
about that? Balabushka's reputation, and he didn't even build his own fronts.
see, now,
Yeah, what do you think of that, Jim?
Let me answer
Okay,
that,
I'll let
Defer to
handle
Bill.
that. Defer to Bill.
No, that's like when we're talking about Ernie, Ernie is the ultimate cue marker that's come down the pipe, in my eyes. Ernie builds a great cue. Ernie's got great design. Ernie's a great artist. What the difference was is you got to think in an era. What George could do, he couldn't build a point.
He had one machine.
Right. He
And
had
a short
one
blade.
machine,
Two,
one
he had a
drill
drill
press, and one bandsaw, and that's all he had, in a cabinet full of aerosol spray cans.
Kremlin.
But this was one thing that was totally different from George and everybody else, and we're back to the era deal. George understands 0-0 fit. He understood everything had to fit.
Machinist.
Yeah.
No, he was like
He built playground
he was like
equipment, but he also built
accordion
business.
player, but somewhere he was
But
smart
he had
enough
that
to know.
machinist attitude about fit.
Yeah, but that was my point. See, what happened was everybody else in the era, they didn't have the tools, they hadn't learned about making everything fit.
They didn't
So
have
if
the
they had a
tools.
gap in something, they just filled it up
Fill it
with
with
glue.
glue.
Extra.
Whereas George understood the materials had to fit perfect against each other so it would work even if you didn't have glue. That's what he understood that none of the others understood, and that's the reason his hit was so good.
That's why so many of his cues are still around.
Exactly. They've
And why so
survived
many
because they don't have
Cues
the air
was.
pockets and the glue and the rest of the stuff go
The
wrong.
rattles and
And it's an
Yep.
apple ring.
Let
And the thing
me
is-
just share with you one story, getting back to where our market's going. Probably, I'm gonna guess, maybe 15 years ago, I said something to Thomas Wayne, when Thomas was doing some just incredibly off-the-wall designs. And I said to him, I said, Thomas, you're selling what should be a $6,000 cue for $3,000. Because no one recognized how difficult it was to make it, because he was the only one out there doing it. And I said to him, I said, as long as you're the only person doing this, you're never going to get how much money you really should for this work. And his response to me was, well, Paul, step up.
Yeah, the market's gonna catch up.
Get into the game. Be part of this market. And his point was, very simply, while you're the only person in town building, this wild designs, doing, really fourth axis type stuff, no one really appreciated that. It wasn't until more people started doing similar stuff and it started to get recognized as something that was really special and really unique that our market really started to pick up. And people really started to wake up and say, wow, he's doing some stuff like no one's ever seen. It's not just 4.4 veneer stuff with boxes and dots and diamonds and maybe some trick ring work. There's some stuff going on here that is truly original design.
Talent.
Exactly.
Let's all hear it for me, shall we?
Okay, good.
You reminded me of something, and this is kind of interesting, and this is on a very personal note, but for the last 2 years, there have been some issues in my family, and for myself, I broke my arm very badly 3 years ago, and was not functional for a year with my arm, and now I've had some health issues with my dad, who is my only family besides my wife, and I'm his only living relative, and I just really was able to get back in my studio in the last couple of months to do some work, to build the few cues that I brought to this show. And one of the things that I rediscovered was that I really love doing this. It's irrelevant to the income because I made perfectly good money, actually in some cases better money than cue making, with consulting and with some other things I've been doing because I couldn't physically build cues or I couldn't be there to build the cues. But the truth is I love building cues, and this statement was thrown around. Jim Buss said it well, and the other people who said it have said it well. We talked about this back in the 90s, in the early 90s, and that was if you really truly are a cue maker, right down to your soul, right down to your core, you would make cues. If there was no money in it, you'd still do it. If you couldn't sell a single cue, you'd still be drawn and driven to do that. Whatever internal demons or lunacy or whatever drives you to be a cue maker, that will still be there. You'll want to do that. If you have that, that's the fundamental thing that can't be learned, that can't be taught, that can't be explained to you. You either have that drive to pursue this as an art form.
Passion.
That's a passion. It's a passion.
You
If you
can't
don't have
teach
that,
it and you can't fake it.
yeah, and if you don't have that passion,
Let me ask you something, Thomas. If all of that is true, how many people do you think would be building cues today if there wasn't CNC?
oh, far
Think
less.
about that now.
Truly, truly far less.
Not to mention all the how-to information that's out there now.
Absolutely, because, and this is, and glad you asked that, because and everyone here has probably been approached in some way or another. I've been approached many times, and I feel that I found the perfect answer to this question. I've been approached mostly by cue makers, or pool players rather, who have said, you know what, I'd like you to,
It's the hind leg.
well, at least he's not going full shit. I've been approached. I've been approached many times by pool players who say, you know, I'd like to learn how to build pool cues. Would you be willing to give me lessons? Will you teach me how to build pool cues? And I came up with the perfect answer after being asked that a few times. I realized, what's that?
Go see Leonard.
Yeah, well, there's that. No, my answer was and is to this day this. I say, absolutely, I will be happy to teach you to play pool cues. Well, how much, or to build pool cues? How much will you charge me? And my answer is, I won't charge you a dime. And we can get started, but first of all, you have to go out and get $30,000 cash. And they would say, well, you just said you wouldn't charge me. Oh, I'm not taking any of the money. When you have $30,000 cash, we're going to go out and buy tools, and we're going to buy wood, and we're going to buy some things that you're going to need to be a cue maker. And I'll help you I'll help lay out your shop. You'll have to set it up. And once your shop is set up with the machinery, and you've got the wood supply and stuff, I will come over once a week and give you free cue maker lessons in your shop. And to this day, no one has taken me up on that offer. And the reason is because they don't have the passion to be a cue maker. They just think, damn, I don't want to get a real job, and it looks like he's doing pretty good.
Yeah.
If I could just learn his secrets, I wouldn't have to work all day. And they think that cue making is not work, and they don't understand that because it's a passion, it exceeds work. I would never work for anyone, regardless of the size of the paycheck, for 12 or 14 or 16 hours a day. I wouldn't do it.
Here.
I wouldn't punch that clock. But I'll go out in my own goddamn shop and stand on concrete till my feet are bleeding for 12 or 14 or 16 hours to build a cue because I am driven to do that. And because I don't want to go in and go to bed before I've reached this point. Not because there's a paycheck at the end of it, but because I want to see that cue be born. I want to be there for the birth of that cue. It's a passion.
And then how do you deal with it when you give birth to it and you look at it and say, this is one ugly kid?
Oh man, that's an ugly baby.
Yeah, now how do you deal?
How would you do?
That's a little bit someone else. And I have a real answer for it too. It used to be when I was building a lot of cues and Craig was working with me in my shop doing all the grunt work, I would do a batch of cues for a show like the Hopkins show or the BCA show, and there would always be a cue or two that when I was all done, it was like whatever I saw in my mind didn't come out in the cue, or whatever I saw in my mind, what the hell was I thinking, and I would hang that cue in the rack and it wouldn't go to the show. And the day came, it was probably the second or third Hopkins show, where I did not have enough cues to fill this travel case that I had, and I actually had to take cues out of the dog pile and put them in the case and take them to the show, thinking, well, I'll put them at the ends of the rack, I'll put the good ones out first, they'll be filler, and then as the rack gets empty, I have something to put in that gap. And those cues would sell before other cues, and that's when I fully realized that my vision of what is desirable is not
the rest of the world.
Is not the rest of the world necessarily. And you and I talked about this, and I thought about running ads that said a dog in every batch, because oddly, yeah, you know what the public will buy. You have to morph, and you have to shift your artistic vision. You have to at least mitigate your artistic vision by what people will buy. Or you can end up, and I love Richard Black to death, and I've already gone on record as saying I think he's one of the most prolific and creative cue makers, probably the most creative cue maker who's ever lived. but Richard has a drawer full of dogs that didn't sell. And because he had the courage to build those queues and take them out there and the public didn't want them.
That's right.
You know?
That's on record.
That's on record, you're gonna get a phone call.
And Richard would
He'll be the first to tell you.
Now, Richard will be the first to tell you. Now, he also would say that's because the public has no taste.
Yeah.
We only have 5 minutes left, and it's gonna be midnight, and the 7 people that are left listening to this, or maybe want to go to sleep, so what's the burning question in the last 5 minutes? Where are we going in the next 20 years, or does anybody else have a topic or a question we can do for 5 minutes?
Decals.
Decals.
Say
What
again?
bearing has the internet had on the market?
Jerry, who has a beautiful website, might be able to provide a good answer to that. You sell a lot of cues off the internet?
Well, I mean, it's just an advertising tool. It's just a tool of exposure. I don't put any prices on the internet, or so probably.
I could answer that question.
I probably don't. I mean, my first. This is I have no expertise. Everybody should have an opinion on this, on the impact that the internet has had on the market. I mean, I think is profound. I've done a tremendous amount of business over the last 20 years, well, 18 years in Japan. My market in Japan has always been very strong, and I love that market. The internet over there has been a great tool. You know, I got people that don't speak my language are clicking around and looking at what I do, and they're creating. I think this is an incredibly important thing in what we do, because we all make very few product. We have to create this giant desire for a product and only fill this little bit of it. And the internet has definitely been a major tool. Keep them wanting more. Because of all these people that really love your cues, so many of them can't afford it, and you know, there's so many reasons why you're not going to sell to them. But you got to keep that appetite big.
Jerry said something that I think is real important for me. I don't have a website or anything like that, but the internet, with the ability to communicate in another country via email, has made things much easier for me.
Brings the world to your door.
Brings the world to your door.
Absolutely.
The translations are there for us, and we're able to communicate with people that
To be able to
we
send
would
a
have
picture.
had no clue what the hell they're telling us. You
To
know?
be able to send a picture.
Send a picture and
is
say, how much is this?
worth
Can we do
everything.
that? You know, it's been tremendous, I think, in that respect.
The speed at which information is disseminated, whether it be cue making, how do I build this, how do I do that, whose cue is best, what is this, the reputations of all the cue makers are now, instead of spoken with just a couple of players, now are spoken worldwide. It's pushing everything faster and faster and faster, because more and more people are learning about it at a quicker rate.
How about this? How about when a cue maker knocks off the design and steals a design of another cue maker
Well, stop
online?
right there. Let me answer that one.
Online, how fast does that spread?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
When somebody
that's
gets
the
a
point.
design stolen,
You get a bad reputation
how
fast.
fast are those bells rung? Yeah.
Jimbo's not here to ring that
That's the
bell,
point.
so.
When people realize that what's been blurred in advertising isn't exactly what it's supposed to be, that's out there. If this guy's cue or this guy's design or that guy's award, that's out there. More and more people know about it. Quicker. It's amazing. It boggles my mind, because when I started cue making, you had to pry stuff out of guys. I mean, and if you didn't know how to do it, you weren't going to get an answer unless you were like in somebody's back pocket.
Did I figure out how to do it?
You did good. You did real good.
Bill, what were you going to
You were
say?
ice cold.
You wanted to address that, and I'm very curious what you had to say.
Yeah, if you go back, you know, and I'm sure you've probably done it, you know, because me and you went into the same book.
Oh, sure.
But every time we've come up with what we think's a new design, it's almost like you can go back in the Renaissance era, and there it is on a damn building.
No, it's
On
there.
a wall, or on a vase, or on a
You know,
piece of jewelry, or.
You know, I've heard this discussed, and I've been in some of these discussions about stealing cue designs. Well, where do you draw that line? I mean, it's like, if you're gonna say, well, oh, you can't steal that design. Now, I'm not into stealing designs, I'll create my own, but at the same time, the 4-point cue was hell before I was born.
Sure.
So if I built a 4-point cue, I just stole the design.
In fact, I think it was 3 or 4 years before you were born.
You know, that makes me older than dirt. But you know, the variations of the designs you can find back in history and all the great engravings and great drawings.
Well, even the stuff that we do in Tarsi comes from centuries and centuries ago. It comes out of architecture.
I don't have a website.
I'd follow up with what Jerry was kind of more or less saying though. I think it's really, really bad if you just take and copy Jerry's cue totally.
Well, we can all pick a name, Felipe.
I'm gonna not name names down, but it's spelled. If you saw something in one of Jerry's cues,
Felipe is spelled A-S-S-H-O-L-E.
and you altered that look to something, you could probably still go find that design from the 14th century.
Sure.
In some engraving or something.
And probably even back then there was a guy like Felipe that was copying.
One guy designed a hieroglyph and then all these Egyptians stole it. I've never had a website, and I carry the unusually unfortunate burden of having the name of Batman's dead father, Bruce Wayne's father, Thomas Wayne. So when you Google my name, there will be 4 million hits, but I'm in the last 10 after all of the ones about Batman's father. That aside, the internet has been incredibly important to me for exactly what you said, communication issues, to be able to send a picture, to be able to get a picture.
Information.
Disseminating it and finding it. If I want to know something more about, and the Kokopelli cue I did is a great example. I knew Kokopelli as the magic flute player, because that's what, I'm not really into Southwest art that much, and that's how I thought of it. I'm sure I read that somewhere, and until I started really searching and researching about that magic flute player, did I really discover the legend and the myths around the Kokopelli, the Hopi Indian, and the Pueblo Indian Kokopelli character.
And you use Google for that.
And I used the internet for that.
And
it
you know,
used to
all
be
the
I'd have
answers
to go to
to
the
the universe are
library
on
and the
Google.
bookstore, and it's made such a difference.
I want to thank everybody. We got to wrap it up. They have informed me that we promised we would be done by 10. I think we left that by a couple
I don't think we
hours.
started till 10, did we?
And
10:30.
I'm just telling you what the hotel said. So we got to tear everything down. So let's adjourn to the bar. One thing.